In early June 2000, law enforcement investigators performed a search warrant in connection to a missing woman on the 16-acre farm of a business owner and grandfather near Kansas City, Kansas. Cadaver dogs alerted them to a spot where two yellow metal barrels stood. The horrific scene inside would unravel a man's near 2 decades-long web of deceit. Who were these victims? And who was the monster who murdered them and stuffed them inside a barrel? Hello, and welcome to Shades of Murder. I'm your host, Alita Caldwell. Each week I explore cases of murder and unfold the layers of darkness that help make humans into monsters. Please be forewarned that each episode contains specific and at times very graphic and disturbing details of the case. This show is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Last episode, I discussed the disturbing childhood and life of convicted murderer Joseph John Famularo and how monsters are created, not born. Well, this week I am going to flip that theory on its head and tell you about a man with two faces. One face proudly wore the mask of a local businessman and grandfather, and the other one was one of calculated and grotesquely organized evil. This begins part 1 of the story of serial killer BDSM grandfather John Edward Robinson. John Edward Robinson was not a complete leech off of everyone in his life. He was an entrepreneur with a string of random, seemingly unrelated businesses throughout Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas. Robinson was not very successful at being a businessman and certainly was not one of any integrity. Hydrogrow Incorporated was his first major company established in the 1980s, which produced hydroponic vegetables. His other company, Equi2, offered financial consulting services. In 1984, John Edward Robinson hired 19-year-old Paula Godfrey to be a sales representative for one of his companies. He told her that she would need to travel to Texas for training, but then the young woman was never seen again. Her father was immediately concerned when he had not heard from his daughter, and he confronted John Robinson. When asked as to where his daughter was, Robinson told Paula's father that he had no idea what he was talking about. Then out of nowhere, letters allegedly written from Paula began to arrive, saying that she was fine and to not worry about her. Investigators later learned that 3 months prior to Paula Godfrey vanishing, John Edward Robinson had established a charity named Kansas City Outreach Program. It was an organization designed to assist young and pregnant women or new mothers who were down on their luck. He would visit shelters and hospitals communicating with social workers about this program. One social worker who spoke to John Robinson said that she was told that it was specifically created to help pregnant young women or young mothers with newborns get the support and resources they desperately needed. It was set up with the goal in mind that with the right help, they could become strong and independent enough to find a job and a residence of their own. Unfortunately, this is around the time that Lisa Stasi would cross paths with John Edward Robinson, sealing the fate of both herself and her infant daughter. Lisa was a tall and very pretty brunette when she fell in love with Carl Stasi in June 1983. The two quickly became married as she had become a child, and on September 3, 1984, Lisa gave birth to a little girl named Tiffany. Unfortunately, the young couple's relationship could not survive, and Carl left them to re-enlist in the Navy in January 1985. Robinson's program provided housing, daycare, transportation, and job training for young and expecting or new mothers. When he contacted the social worker about this organization, he alleged that he was specifically looking for young Caucasian women, since the program already had many women who were African American. It was important, he said, for the charity to show racial balance in its participants. Robinson was looking for white women in their teens or early 20s who had just had a baby, were having a tough time, or who were disadvantaged, and specifically had no other support or family connections. In early 1985, John Edward Robinson informed the social worker that Hope House, a similar organization, had brought Lisa Stasi to his program, whom he had put up in a motel in Kansas City. During this same period of time, John Edward Robinson was looking to find a private adoption for his younger brother Donald and his wife Helen, who could not have children of their own. The couple desperately wanted a baby, and Robinson claimed to know an adoption attorney. He told his brother that if he sent him a $2,500 check paid out to his business Equi 2, this would cover any related fees and there would be a baby available for them to adopt that October. John Robinson later had to break the news to them that the birth mother had changed her mind, but that he hadn't given up searching for a child. One afternoon on January 8, 1985, Lisa Stasi dropped Tiffany off at her sister-in-law Kathy's home. She was excited to share with her how she had recently met a man named John Osborne. He was helping her find employment and to complete her GED. She also told her that there was even the possibility of her being able to travel as part of training for the job. The next day, when Lisa arrived to pick up her daughter, she told Kathy that John Osborne had paid for a room for them at the Roadway Inn at Overland Park. Lisa left Kathy's phone number for John Osborne at the motel in case he called and needed to get a hold of her. He soon called to receive directions to Kathy's home and went to pick up Lisa and her daughter. Lisa left her own vehicle behind at her brother and sister-in-law's house. Within an hour, Lisa called Kathy to let her know they had arrived fine at the motel. Less than 2 hours later, though, Lisa's mother-in-law, Betty Stasi, received a call from her. She was in complete hysterics, crying heavily into the phone in sheer panic. Lisa said that they told her that Betty was going to take Tiffany away from her because she thought Lisa was an unfit mother. Betty Stasi did her best to calm Lisa down, telling her that whatever they were saying was not true and that she had no intention of taking her daughter away from her. Then Lisa told her that they wanted her to sign 4 blank pieces of paper. Betty Stasi insisted that Lisa not sign any papers. All of a sudden, Lisa said, "Here they come," and she abruptly hung up the phone. Betty had no idea who they were and what in the world Lisa was so worked up about. A few days later, a strange letter arrived. It was typewritten and signed Lisa at the bottom to imply that it was written by her. It spoke of how she had decided to leave town and begin a new life with her daughter. It didn't say where she was going or how she intended to support them. This is the last time anyone would see or talk to Lisa Stasi or her daughter Tiffany. On the day of an awful snowstorm, John Edward Robinson arrived home with a baby, claiming that she was from a private adoption. He got on the phone, excited to tell his brother to let him know that he had a baby for them. Robinson claimed that the birth mother didn't want to give up the child once she had her, but that her family was not supportive of this decision. Instead, the young woman dropped her baby off at a local shelter and tragically ended up taking her own life. On January 10, 1985, the excited couple flew into Kansas City from Chicago to adopt their new baby girl. Robinson had them sign all of the necessary legal paperwork, including a petition for adoption, at his business office at Equi 2. His brother Donald gave him an additional $3,000 cashier check, payable to Doug Wood, to cover the remaining adoption expenses. The couple named the little girl Heather Tiffany Robinson and flew back to their home in Chicago the next day. That same day, Lisa's sister-in-law Kathy contacted the Roadway Inn to speak to her and learned that the room was no longer under the name John Osborne. She immediately filed a missing persons report for her sister-in-law. John Robinson was initially a person of interest and was interviewed by Overland Park Police on the 1st of February 1985. He told the detective all about his charity that he had established for young mothers. He confessed that Lisa Stasi had been part of the program and that he had even put her up at the Roadway Inn for a night. According to the police, John Robinson told them that Lisa showed up out of nowhere in his office, returning the motel key to him, and thanked him for his help, but that it was no longer needed. She allegedly said that she had made other plans and left with a young white male in an older model green vehicle. John Robinson would also give this same type of story to his Missouri parole and probation officer, Steve Hames, specifying that Lisa had left town with a man named Bill, whom she was moving with to Colorado. This story was backed up by a woman named Cora Holmes, who informed investigators that when she babysat Tiffany a few days ago, she was told that Lisa had moved to Arkansas with her new boyfriend, Bill Summers. Investigators would later learn that Cora Holmes was paid $800 by John Edward Robinson to provide this false information. That next month, Donald and Helen Robinson received their final adoption papers, including the baby's birth certificate. The petition for adoption was signed by attorney Douglas Woods, who had experienced in over 100 adoptions, but it was not Mr. Woods' signature on the document. In fact, Douglas Woods had never represented John Robinson or anyone in his family for an adoption, nor had he received the money necessary for the required paperwork. John Edward Robinson also forged the signature on the decree of a different attorney, Ronald Wood, which appeared to be signed by Judge Michael H. Farley, which was proven later to be a forgery. Robinson, however, did have a relationship with the notary who allegedly signed the petition and decree. Evie Gresham was one of many of his BDSM lovers, but she claimed that not only did she ever view these adoption documents, her name was incorrectly spelled, and she was not even a public notary. It was revealed that how during her relationship with John Robinson, he had her sign several blank pieces of paper. Why was this time and time again not a red flag to these women? I would never, no matter what the circumstances, sign any blank piece of paper. John Edward Robinson's unscrupulous practices would land him in jail on criminal charges of theft through deceit. His natural propensity for deception and what many found to be his charming facade would be used to execute his most heinous of crimes. In 1987, John Edward Robinson was found guilty of fraudulent crimes against another company, and he was incarcerated for several years at the Western Missouri Correctional Center in Cameron, Missouri. The same year that John Robinson was sent to jail, it is believed that he was involved in the disappearance and likely homicide of a woman named Catherine Clampett, who was in her mid-20s when she went missing. Catherine was a very pretty and petite young mother of Korean descent. She had recently relocated from Texas to Overland Park to live with her brother's family. She had been struggling with drugs and alcohol and didn't feel she was in the right state to take care of her young son. So she left Wichita Falls, Texas, leaving her young son in her parents' care while she sought out a new job opportunity in Kansas. She found an employment ad posted by John Robinson for Equi 2, listed as a management consulting firm in Overland Park. The ad for the position, her brother later noted, was very bizarre. It offered the promise of international travel and a brand new wardrobe. Obviously, this should have been a red flag to this young woman, but this was how John Robinson lured in the most vulnerable. She happily accepted the position, and according to her brother, it was common for her to stay overnight at hotels. Something was different, though, when his sister did not return back to his home one night on June 15, 1987, and he grew immediately concerned. He visited John Robinson at his business, who merely replied to him that he was fully aware he was looking for Catherine. She was never seen or heard from after that day. While John Edward Robinson was doing his time in jail for theft by deception due to his business-related fraud charges, he found a new woman to love and thus a new victim. The prison librarian Beverly Bonner, whose husband was a doctor and prison physician at the correctional facility. Somehow this intelligent woman became smitten with the master manipulator. She was employed at the prison in 1992 and 1993 and fell completely for John Robinson's game. Beverly Bonner filed for divorce from her much more respectable husband in 1993, telling him that she was looking for property for John Robinson's hydroponic project for when he was released. Once freed in the early 1990s, John Robinson would create a mobile home trade magazine titled Manufactured Modular Home Living. Similar to his other pretty much worthless ventures, it was not very successful either, and he soon began to look for a new target. Beverly Bonner during this same time told her husband that she was relocating to Chicago for a new job opportunity. But after February 1994, when their divorce was finalized, she was never seen or heard by her loved ones again. Beverly Bonner appeared to have vanished without a word. She missed her brother Llewell Heath's wedding in September that following year. Her oldest son tragically died in October 1995, yet she was a no-show for her own child's funeral. How was this not an obvious sign of something malicious having happened to her, you may wonder? Well, in December 1993, months before she disappeared, John Edward Robinson, pretending to be James Turner, established a mailbox under Beverly Bonner's name at the mailroom in Olathe, Kansas. On January 1st, 1994, he then executed a lease for Box 182 under her name, presenting her identification, and informed the owner that Bonner was working in Australia, so she asked him to collect her mail. Beverly Bonner's ex-husband William sent her a monthly alimony check of $1,000, which was deposited to John Robinson's business account for Hydrogrow each month for 18 months. An account had been opened on February 1st, 1994, with both of their authorized signatures of Beverly Bonner and James Turner, as he had many times before, which had become his pattern and his go-to pertaining to the cover-up of his crimes. John Edward Robinson sent fake letters to Beverly Bonner's family members to continue on with his ruse. Her brother Larry received a letter purportedly handwritten by her that talked about how she would be traveling a lot for her new job with an international corporation in Chicago. Then, a couple months later, he received another letter. This one was typed instead, which he found to be odd since she always hand-wrote letters. He would receive these kinds of letters every 3 to 4 months, and his brother Lowell received around 6 letters from his sister Beverly during the same time frame. Her letters were postmarked around the world, including from France, the Netherlands, Australia, and Kansas City. They believed these to be from their sister since the signature appeared to be Beverly's. But then in early 1997, the letters abruptly stopped. When this happened, her family reported her missing. Perhaps the most disturbing story, especially considering its victims, is the one I share next with you. Sheila married a man named John Faith, and she gave birth to a little girl named Debbie Lynn on October 17, 1978. Sadly, the baby was born with many physical challenges, including cerebral palsy, which severely restricted her ability to walk and control her bladder. When Sheila's husband, John Faith, tragically died in 1993, she relocated from California to Pueblo, Colorado, where her dear friend Nancy Guerrero lived. She and her daughter struggled to survive on the Social Security benefits alone. It was later reported by her friend Nancy Guerrero that Sheila had felt very lonely. She wanted someone in her life and had decided to answer a personal ad. Sheila had also shared with her friend her interest in the BDSM lifestyle, but didn't talk too much about it because it was not Nancy's thing and it kind of made her a little uncomfortable. It was also noted later that Sheila's sister was aware that she had an interest in this. In the spring of 1994, Sheila Faith's path would unfortunately cross that of John Edward Robinson's. He was the man whose personal ad she had answered. John Robinson fed her lies about his being a very successful executive who wanted to whisk her away on a cruise and was more than happy to place her daughter Debbie in a good private school. Sheila excitedly shared this all with her friend Nancy and her sister Kathy. Kathy Norman later told investigators that her sister told her that she had met a man who was wealthy, they were going to travel the world together, and that he was going to purchase her disabled daughter a wheelchair and a handicap-accessible van. This man, whom she believed was going to make all of her stresses in life just poof disappear and treat her and her daughter better than ever before was named Jim Turner. Sheila and Debbie Faith had planned on meeting Jim Turner in person and getting to know him for a few weeks before heading to Texas to see some family. Nancy Guerrero had expected Sheila to come back to Colorado after a few weeks, though, because they had tickets for the state fair. Sheila had been looking forward to entering her cross-stitched angel into a craft competition there. When Sheila had left for Kansas City, her roommate noticed that she did not travel with anything like bedding or furniture, as if she had planned on staying somewhere long-term. She never heard or saw Sheila or Debbie Faith ever again, nor did Sheila's sister Kathy. In December 1994, Kathy Norman received a letter postmarked from Canada. It was supposedly from Sheila. She said she had met a great new man named Jim, but Kathy didn't believe the letter was from her sister because she always wrote handwritten letters, and the signature appeared to be a forgery. She received another letter after an entire year had passed without hearing from her sister, and again she did not believe it was from Sheila. Her other sister, Michelle Fox, also believed the letter she received was fraudulent for the same reasons Kathy did. There was the voice and the style of communication which was unlike their sisters. Later it would be discovered that the cross-stitched angel that Sheila Faith was going to submit to the competition at the Colorado State Fair was found in the possession of yet another of Robinson's lovers, Sandra Shields, whom he had gifted it to in 1995. Isabella Lovitska was a young Polish woman who had lived in Indiana with her family since she was 11 years old. She was very passionate about the arts and became an undergraduate student at Purdue University in the fall semester of 1996. Isabella was a free and eccentric spirit, and she was known for being interested in things not considered very commonplace or normal in society, like paganism, goth culture, and the BDSM lifestyle. In early 1997, the path of this adventurous 20-year-old would unfortunately meet that of John Edward Robinson's. Isabella Lovitska could not contain her excitement about the amazing opportunity she had been presented with. She eagerly shared the news with her friend Jennifer that an international book agent in Kansas City had offered her a secretarial position and also wanted her to illustrate some of their BDSM manuscripts. This agent was an older married man who was going to train her in the quote-unquote dominant role. He asked Isabella to call him master, and when she let it slip to her friend that his name was John, she appeared concerned since he had stressed the importance of confidentiality. Isabella Lovitska had become friends with a girl named Dawn at this time, who was a fellow student at Purdue. She often used Dawn's computer to access the internet, and she shared with her how she had met an older guy online who had offered her an amazing opportunity, illustrating and editing books at his publishing company in Kansas City. Isabella said that the man's name was John and that he had already lined up an apartment for her when they weren't traveling for the job. However, she did not share these details with her parents. She only told them that she had been offered an internship with a publisher in Kansas City for the summer, and that if she had been given a regular job, she would consider staying out there longer. On June 8th, the anxious and enthusiastic young woman packed up her bags and left Indiana for Kansas City. When she arrived, John Robinson helped her get established with a private mailbox, which had the same address she had told her parents she would be living at. Both herself and Robinson had full access to the mailbox. Later that year in October, he would have a 2-year auto policy drawn up for her vehicle, claiming her as an employee. He also had Isabella open an account with Bank of America on November 14th. Then the following year, things became really bizarre. In February 1997, Robinson called the property manager at Deerfield Apartment Complex in Olathe, equating a corporate apartment. He claimed that he needed a space where he could train his employees before sending them off to their permanent positions out of state. Within the rental application, he wrote down himself and Isabella Lovitska as the occupants. Robinson told the manager that they had met while attending a graphics trade show. He said that she had been abused by her parents, so he decided to take care of her, like he would a daughter, and had even recently adopted her. There is no known reason as to why he claimed Isabella to be his adopted daughter. I presume that it was just part of the game he liked playing with people. Between March 1st, 1998 through February 28th, 1999, Isabella Levitska was the primary tenant of the apartment. Now, prior to the lease expiring, John Robinson had contacted A.J. Lang Property Management, inquiring about a place he could use to house and train his female employees for his publishing company. Isabella, however, resided in a new apartment at Edgebrook between January 15, 1999 through the end of January 2000. Just as she had dreamed and shared with everyone, Isabella did work for Robinson's company, Specialty Publications, and handled some of the graphics of the ads inside the magazine. A few years earlier, when she was hired, similar to what he had conveyed to the apartment manager, he had told his broker, Karen Scott, that Isabella was his adopted daughter. It was observed by a woman who also did some work for the magazine that their flirtatious and touchy-feely behavior toward one another suggested an altogether different kind of relationship. In fact, Isabella Levitska frequently presented herself in the public as his wife. She registered under the name Isabella Levitska Robinson for a drafting course she attended at the local community college, and even told her teacher that she was married to an older gentleman. It was also noted by several businesses around town that she introduced herself as Isabella Levitska Robinson. And what about the real Mrs. Robinson? Apparently, she had learned of their ongoing sexual relationship in 1997. Nancy Robinson knew this one was different from all of her husband's affairs. Unlike the other women who had trotted in and out of her husband's life, when she asked him that he break things off with, he always did. This one felt like a real threat. She genuinely feared that she may lose her husband to this much younger and more eccentric, fun-loving woman. Then Isabella Levitska disappeared sometime in the late summer or early fall months of 1999. At the beginning of that same summer, John Edward Robinson had persuaded another of his online lovers, Barbara Sander, to relocate from Canada to Kansas City. On August 18, 1999, Barbara Sander moved into an unfurnished duplex at Hunters Point. When she told John Robinson that she needed furniture and decor for her place, he told her that he would take care of things. On August 23rd, random household items were brought over. Over the next 2 weeks, his new paramour, Barbara, would be surprised with everything from art, hundreds of books, and everything her kitchen, bath, and bedroom could ever want or need. The investigation into Isabella Levitska's disappearance would reveal that much of the belongings inside Barbara Sanders' duplex were hers, which had been moved out of her old place and into Barbara's. As if this man was not juggling enough women and lies in his life, John Robinson also resparked his romance with a woman named Alicia Cox in early 1999. When she suddenly lost her job and didn't have a place to stay, he welcomed her to live into Isabella's old apartment at the Edgebrook. He told Alicia Cox that Isabella, the girl who had been working for him, all of a sudden just took off, quitting her job and ran off with a new boyfriend. She found this all to be a bit strange, so even though she happily helped herself to some of the clothes she left behind, she decided to not reside in this girl's old apartment. Months before the lease expired, John Robinson informed the property manager that the apartment was now vacant. Once the place was inspected upon move-out, it was noted how although most of the residence was pretty unkept, the 2 bedrooms had been cleaned spotless. In September, John Robinson told his publishing broker, Scott, that they needed to find a new graphics designer. He explained that Isabella had been arrested for smoking marijuana and was deported back to Czechoslovakia. First of all, how beyond disdainful and disrespectful of him that he didn't even say, or maybe he didn't even care to remember, that Isabella Levitska was from Poland. He likely figured no one else knew, so he could make up whatever he wanted, and apparently they bought this nonsense. John Robinson also withdrew the last of her money from the account at Bank of America he had set up for her, making a check out in the amount of $500 to his company, Specialty Publications. Just like how he treated his other victims' family members and friends as if they were idiots, corresponding with them in ways that were so out of character, John Robinson also attempted to sell himself as Isabella to her loved ones after she disappeared. Her father had emailed his daughter while she was living in Kansas City between 25 to 30 times, and every time she had been outspoken and rebellious with him, even a little bit rude. She was almost always short with her father, a little hostile and defensive because she didn't want her parents trying to control her and her life. Then, out of nowhere, on April 14th, 2000, he received an email that was supposedly from his daughter, telling him how busy she had been the last few weeks traveling around China. Unlike all of her other emails, this one was nice, polite, and respectful. So he knew that it was definitely not from his daughter. Suzette Marie Trueton was a 27-year-old nurse when she was drawn into Robinson's web of deceit. Living in the area of Monroe, Michigan at the time, the two struck up a conversation online. Suzette was a very active member of the BDSM community. She had met many different people online through websites, chat rooms, and even through her own webpage. Suzette would sometimes meet up with individuals who shared her sexual fetish in person, and on occasion she would even travel out of state to meet them. Although Suzette was very close to her mother, whom she spoke with on a daily basis, who lived nearby, her mother was completely in the dark about her youngest child's sexual interests and exploits. Suzette's involvement in the community would meet up with John Edward Robinson in the mid-1990s when she met a woman named Laura Remington. She and Laura shared a passion for BDSM sex games, and soon Laura had Trueton trained as a slave for online role-playing. Suzette also met a friend of Remington's named Tammy Taylor, who was an active member of the BDSM community. Suzette learned a lot from these two women, and this new submissive role really excited her. She soon sought out positions online, advertising herself as a slave. While hunting for women online, John Edward Robinson saw this young, dark-haired woman and answered her ad. They emailed one another back and forth for a few months before John laid out the bait. Suzette Trueton was so excited when she shared with her mother she had met a man who wanted to hire her to take care of his aging father, whom he referred to as Papa John. John Robinson alleged that he and his father had many, many successful companies all around the world. They needed to travel internationally to sell some of them off, and he would need care for his father as they visited these various destinations. John Robinson promised her that her wages would include $60,000 a year, in addition to traveling around the world to such amazing locations as Belgium and Switzerland. In fall of that same year, Suzette traveled to Kansas City to meet with John Edward Robinson. The two hit it off great, and she returned home a couple days later. Suzette confessed that she had some hesitation about being so far away from her family and hometown, but it was just too great of an opportunity for her to pass up. She decided that she would sign a contract to work for John Robinson for a year, which would accrue her enough money to return to school. In November that following month, Suzette returned to Kansas City to sign her employment agreement and search for a residence. Suzette Trueton was absolutely thrilled about this new prospect, especially the opportunity to travel around the country and even internationally with this man and his wealthy father. She eagerly shared her plans with her family and friends. Her friend Laura Remington, her aunt, father, and even a former employer in Michigan would later tell investigators how Suzette Trueton had claimed she would be earning $6,500 a month for taking care of this man's ailing father while traveling to exotic locations like Australia. Suzette Trueton spent the last few months of 1999 and the beginning of 2000 hyping herself up about the new life that awaited her in the coming year. John Robinson knew that education was important to her, and he told her that they would be abroad long enough for her to pursue educational opportunities. Suzette spent a lot of time researching different colleges in Switzerland and Belgium, daydreaming about the courses she could attend there. She had her passport application filled out and ready to submit at a moment's notice. Prior to leaving for Kansas City, Suzette's aunt, Marcella Chittister, helped to compile a list of contact information for her family members and friends. On February 12, 2000, Suzette, along with her precious Pekingese fur babies, Pika and Harry, took off for a prosperous and exciting new adventure. John Robinson had not only paid for the rental truck to bring her out to Kansas City, but he also had made sure she had a room reserved for 7 nights at the Guest House Suites in Lenexa. The reservation had been made under his company, Specialty Publications, which published his mobile home magazine. However, much to her disappointment, the hotel had a strict no-pet policy, so she was forced to place her 2 dogs into boarding. John Robinson was recorded as having taken Pika and Harry to Ridgeview Animal Hospital in Olathe, claiming that they were his employees' dogs and they needed to be boarded there until the end of February. Upon Suzette Trenton's arrival in Kansas City, she spoke to her mother on the phone every day. She told her mother that she and John would be embarking on their travels soon, so it made more sense for her to place her things in a storage unit instead of renting an apartment. Suzette Trenton also shared with her mother that they were no longer traveling to Switzerland first, as planned. Rather, they would be heading to California to pick up John Robinson's new yacht and sail it to Hawaii. It is ridiculous the tales this man spun, and even more astonishing how so many women, intelligent and capable, strong women, were manipulated by him to the point that they believed these asinine promises. I guess they just really wanted to believe that this man was genuine and that his promise of a better life for them was the truth. It is also a testament to his very impressive conman skills. If it sounds too good to be true, ladies and gentlemen, that means in all likelihood and probability it is, and your spidey senses should be tingling. Prior to Suzette Trenton moving to Kansas City for this too-good-to-be-true employment and travel opportunity, the details of the personal arrangement between her and Robinson would be revealed later, and intimate instant messages between the two in a program through Yahoo. Their messages clearly indicated the sexual nature of their relationship, and that they were engaged in an ongoing BDSM, quote-unquote, slave contract. There was even visual evidence of their sexual relationship in the form of videotape. On the morning of March 1st, 2000, around 1 a.m., Suzette Trenton had called her mother to say goodbye before leaving for California. This was the last time Carolyn Trenton would ever hear her daughter's voice. Suzette had also been chatting with her friend Laura Remington prior to this last conversation with her mother. Laura also never heard from or saw her friend again. A few days later, Carolyn Trenton received a letter from her daughter in a pink envelope. She was kind of taken back by communication from her daughter arriving in the form of a letter versus their usual phone call. Suzette really wasn't the kind of person to write letters, and spelling and grammar were not her strong points. It was postmarked March 6th from Kansas City, with no return address, just her name. The letter itself was dated February 28th and was handwritten. Although she recognized the handwriting to be her daughter's, it didn't make any sense to her that the envelope was dated on March 6th, when Suzette had told her they were leaving March 1st. This was not the only letter supposedly sent from Suzette, as her father in Florida received a similar one, with the exact same dates on the envelope and on the letter inside. Something did not sit right with Carolyn Trenton about the discrepancy of these dates, and her and her ex-husband receiving letters instead of phone calls from their daughter. Carolyn Trenton decided that she needed to know what was going on with her daughter. so she called John Edward Robinson. When Carolyn pointed out the strangeness of the postmark, Robinson explained to her that Suzette had suddenly become involved with a man named Jim Turner, someone she had met while in Kansas City, and ran off with him instead of accepting the position. John Robinson expressed to her that there had been no hard feelings and that he wished Suzette the very best. Although she still felt the situation to be a bit odd, Carolyn thanked him for his help and asked him that if he did talk to her daughter, to please have her call her. Only a few weeks later, Carolyn Trenton would receive another letter. When this letter arrived, it was postmarked from San Jose, California, which was bizarre in itself because John Robinson had said Suzette had decided not to follow him there. The letter was also typed instead of handwritten with her daughter's signature in the corner. When the letter began with the sentence, and I quote, "Well, I'm off on an adventure of a lifetime," Carolyn was sure that her daughter had not written the letter. Nothing about it sounded like Suzette. She didn't speak in that tone, use that kind of language or vocabulary, and she certainly was not someone who would type a letter. Her mother and father were not the only ones in Suzette's personal circle to receive letters from her. Her grandmother received a letter right before her birthday on April 9th. It was postmarked March 27, 2000, and sent from San Jose, California. Suzette's Aunt Chittister observed her, although the writing on the mailing address of the envelope appeared to be her niece's. The name S. Truetten spelled in the sender was most certainly not. Then several weeks passed. Some members of Suzette's family received letters postmarked from Veracruz, Mexico. Her Aunt Chittister, who had found the birthday card sent to her mom from Suzette months earlier to be suspicious, received an envelope clearly written by her, but again the return address was not. This letter again was out of character as it was typewritten and used language and a style of writing that did not fit her niece's. It spoke of all of her adventures while traveling, and at the bottom was signed, "Love you, Suzette." The letter was dated May 5th, 2000. Suzette Trenton's niece, her father, and her grandmother also received eerily similar letters from Veracruz, Mexico, all postmarked on May 19th. Letters were not the end of John Edward Robinson's scheme to lead Suzette Trenton's loved ones to believe she was fine. Shortly before she disappeared, he had requested that Suzette in an email provide him with her login and password information for all of her email accounts. She obliged blindly, without hesitation or questions as to why, and emailed him all this information. John Robinson also had the email addresses for several of her family members and friends. Only one day after Suzette Trenton vanished, her friend Laura Remington got an email from her saying how she and her dogs had set off for, and I quote, "the adventure of a lifetime." When Laura told whom she believed to be her friend Suzette how she had just broken off her relationship with her master, Suzette, which was actually John Robinson, referred her to someone who could be her new master. When Laura emailed eruditemaster@email.com, she began to strike up a conversation with a man named Jim Turner. Yes, the same man who most likely murdered one of her best friends was now attempting to lure her in under one of his aliases. There were no limits to this man's arrogance or his sinister games. When an email was received by several members of Suzette's family on March 24, 2000, once again, her intuitive and observant Aunt Chittister knew that her niece had not written that email. Suzette didn't speak in that way. It said that she wouldn't have access to the internet for an unknown period of time while traveling, but that she had written to her mother and that she would do her best to keep in touch. She also didn't buy that Suzette would send an email instead of calling them before embarking on such a long trip. A little more than a month later, John Robinson would discuss Suzette's disappearance with Laura Remington while he casually chatted with her under his alias Jim Turner. He told Laura that Suzette had stolen his credit cards and that he had hired someone to look into the matter. He also asked that she give him information on all of Suzette's BDSM partners. None of this sat right with Laura, and she began to be suspicious toward this Jim Turner character. She went to the police, and after speaking about the request with law enforcement, they encouraged her to lead him on. And so she sent John Robinson this information. Initially, Laura had believed that Jim Turner was a friend of Suzette's employer, John Robinson, and even shared with her friend Taylor how she had been chatting with this man. When she said to Laura that she should ask him if he has any single friends who are into BDSM. Laura did, and Robinson told her to have Taylor contact Tom at prepo@usa.net. No surprise that Tom was just another alias of John Robinson's, and he used it to manipulate Taylor into believing he was and I quote, a very aggressive and hard-working businessman who would make for the best master. He began to regularly discuss sex-related topics with her via email and even began to call her. He left a message saying that he had changed his email to BDSM Tom. Robinson, pretending to be Tom, let Taylor know that if she were his slave, he would take damn good care of her. On May 28, 2000, she received an email from this new Hotmail account requesting her presence in Kansas City. It was signed in all capitals, Master. Tammy Taylor was not someone to blindly meet a stranger, and she requested that he send her a reference from one of his former slaves. He provided her with the email slavedancer@hotmail.com. When she emailed this individual, she received a reply on May 31st, in which the email referred to Tom as the master through its entire content. No surprise that Slave Dancer was also Robinson pretending to be one of his own slaves. Fortunately for her, Tammy Taylor would never hear from Master Tom again. Suzette Trenton was not the only woman in 2000 to fall prey to this con man's trickery. In March 2000, Vicki Newfield was a geriatric therapist in Texas when she suddenly lost her job. She was faced with terrible financial circumstances, and it was during this time that she placed personal ads on BDSM websites. Unfortunately, she would strike up a conversation with John Edward Robinson, and the two began to email one another, discussing a potential BDSM relationship. As John Robinson was known for doing with all of his online slaves, he sent Vicki Newfield a slave contract to review. On April 23rd, he invited her to come see him in person in Kansas City. John Robinson gave her his usual spiel about his being a very successful businessman and that he had good connections in the area to help her find a job there, as he had for many professional women like herself. He told Vicki that he would be there to support her and that maybe they also could have a BDSM relationship. Vicki landed in Kansas City that same day, and John Robinson set her up at a place at Extended Stay America in Overland Park. She had brought along her own set of sex toys for the trip, per his request. The two had sexual contact at different times over the next few days. Then, on April 26th, John Robinson claimed that he needed to leave for Israel to conduct some business there, but that he wanted to make arrangements for her to permanently relocate to Kansas. He said his company would be happy to pay for her to move her things out as early as that weekend. In return, all he asked was that she leave her sex toys behind with him, so she had extra incentive to return to him. She did as he requested, and left behind her rattan-type canes and a bag full of sex toys, which she valued at around $700. When she arrived back in Texas, a moving truck never came. She never heard from John Robinson either. So on May 22nd, 2000, she contacted him, asking him to send her back her sex toys now. But he refused. Vicki Newfield was not so easily pushed aside and refused to be taken advantage of. She went straight to the police and filed a report against him for theft. This woman coming forward with these, by comparison, petty crimes committed against her, would reveal the horrifying truth. This ends part 1 of BDSM grandfather, serial killer John Edward Robinson. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I am beyond thrilled to be your host. Until next time, stay safe and watch out for shades of murder happening in the streets, next door, especially inside your own home. Shades of Murder is created, researched, written, and edited by Alita Caldwell. Original song Stranger, composed by Stereocode.